In this art lesson, we'll learn how to use watercolour paints to create art with emphasis. Emphasis is a principle of art. It's the ability to attract attention and make an element stand out. Most images need a focal point or points to provide visual emphasis. These are elements that attract the eye and act as a visual. We will also look at some paintbrush techniques to apply opacity and colour richness to create an attractive layered 3D form. Materials you'll need for this lesson are a flower sprig with a few green leaves, any colour, any size, a set of watercolours. Here I'm using a set of artist quality Dalla and Rowney watercolours as I just love the richness in colour. However, whatever watercolour set you have at home will be fine. A pencil and eraser, one large tip paintbrush and one small round tip paintbrush. Black pens. Here I've used two black fine liner pens, size 0.5 and 0.3. If you don't have these pens, you can work with a ballpoint pen or biro, as it's also known as. You will also need a ruler to measure out a border. Step 1 of this activity is to measure out your border. Here I did a border of 5 centimeter thickness, so make sure that you get that accurate, and when you draw your border, make sure your lines are super light as we want to rub it out later on. Having explored the outside environment, luckily we've got some lovely blooms in the garden at the moment, so I just picked and choose which one that I thought would work best. And this is where you can start playing around with the composition, meaning the way that you arrange your elements to make them look the most attractive. Once you're happy with the composition, next it's time to outline where you want your shapes to be. I recommend that you make your shapes overlap the borders because for the emphasis of this painting, we want the inside of the rectangle to be coloured and the outside border around that rectangle to be just black and white using a pen. When happy with the outline shapes, you need to erase the pencil marks just to make them very, very light because we don't want them to show up through the painting. These are really just to give us a rough guideline of where to paint. Before we paint over the top of our pencil shape sketch, we're going to do a little practice test run on a separate piece of paper. So you'll need the flower that you're copying from and your larger round tip paintbrush for this. So as I'm working with a set of pink flowers here, they range from light to medium to dark pink tones. So we're going to practice creating that perfect petal shape, layering up the petals and trying to gain that gradient going from light to medium to dark. So to make this effect of the petals, what I want you to do is get the colour of the flower that you are painting. Make sure that you have enough water on your paintbrush to bleed the colours into each other, and as you can see here, I'm simply just rolling the paintbrush around to create this sort of petal effect, and the center or where the tip of the paintbrush is where the richness and darkness of color is showing up, leaving this lovely sort of gradient effect and almost opacity to the outer petals themselves. So if you want lighter petals, then you need to add more water to dilute your paint, and also the water helps to create that blending effect. You can also do this with two different colours, however I'm just using pink as that is the colour of my flower. For example, if you have a flower of two colours, if you want to combine the two colours together, for example let's say purple and yellow, then first you could dip your paintbrush in a yellow, the entireness of it, and then just dip the tip into the purple, and then you can create a test page of different petal effects to see which one works best for you. Once you're happy with the paint effects and brush marks, then you can feel more confident to start painting over the top of your shapes where you plotted them in with your pencil. So you will also see here that I do a range of maybe 2 to 3 layers of the watercolour, and the trick with watercolour is to let it dry and build up the richness of colour. So if you're not quite happy with the depth of the watercolour, don't fret, let it dry, come back to it and then layer up another colour. The reason why I say this is because it gives more form and a sort of visual appearance of layered different tones and textures. So here you can see I'm also turning the paper, which does help as well. It means that I don't smudge the paint with my hand, and I'm just working on filling up where I see it needs. Once you get your first layer of flower petals down, you need to let these dry. So whilst waiting for them to dry, I'm going to take the fine tip paintbrush and we're going to choose which colour of green, okay, that matches the best to the stem of your plant or leaves of your plant. So I recommend taking a separate piece of paper again and just doing a few paint lines to test which colour works best in the match, and then once you're happy with your selection, you can then start to paint with a very fine tip paintbrush the shape of where the leaves should go. Try not to overlap over the petals that you've just drawn, and try to get the outside shape of the leaves not too dry, so keep remembering to keep wetting that paintbrush into your water pot to allow the paint shape of the leaf to be nice and smooth. I'd also like to remind you that within the rectangle itself, that is where the emphasis is. So it's only the colour needs to be within the rectangle. Outside of the rectangle should be no paint at all, so it should just be black and white pen at a later date. So fill in where you want the leaves to go, and to be honest, I've just used one paint colour here. Okay, this green was so well matched that I thought, brilliant, I'll use the water to dilute it if I want it to be a lighter tone, and if I want it to be a darker green tone, then I will simply just add more paint to my paintbrush. An important note is when filling in your leaves, try to go in the same direction that you see the leaf veins. Okay, so that is going to be the thing that really creates that illusion of reality when you try to replicate the same directions that you see of line. Now at this specific time in Muscat, it was 9 AM in the morning and we had a lot of very lovely natural sunlight coming through the window, hence the very strong dark shadows coming through, so please ignore those, and I'm just about to rectify that. So when the watercolour of the petals has dried, then you can go in with another second coat, doing the same brush technique that we used before, and this is where we start to see the layering up and texture of the flower itself. If you have white water paint, it's a really good idea to try to layer up a little bit of white over the top of your darker dried paint as well. That's what I did here to create that lighter illusion. And then here, while I'm letting the white paint dry, I'm also going over with a very thin paintbrush again over the leaves, and you'll notice that I'm going in the same direction as the leaves and stems lines follow, so try to keep your paintbrush lines flowing all in one direction. Once the white layer of paint is dry, then I'm going to go in once more and lastly again with a richer colour just to give it more depth. Lastly, to finish this picture, we're going to add an element of line, and I'm going to choose a 0.5 fine line pen to go and make a continuation of our lines around the border. So just imagine that the leaf is continuing and then with the finer 0.3 pen, if you have one, then you can plot in where you want your fine lines to go. It's up to you on how much or how little of the line element that you want to add, but as long as around the border you give that illusion of that continuation of shape, then you will have greater emphasis on the central colour display within the rectangle that we originally drew. Before we finish this video, I just wanted to show some previous art examples of some students from Year 6. These are just a few ideas to get your ideas going as well. As you can see, these are really effective. Not all of them are still life-based, but they really do show a very strong emphasis and are very effective.